Chapter 6, Lesson 1. The Revolution Begins. It's a hot and humid August evening in Gonzales. Usually you and Papa would be taking a cool swim in the creek, but tonight all the adults know you are meeting at your house. You are playing outdoors with the other children. It is not a happy event, though. You have heard your parents talk about a dangerous time ahead. They believe the Mexican army is on its way to Texas. The sound of adult voices drifts through the open windows. It is a worried sound. You wonder whether life will ever return to normal. Early battles. In 1835, Stephen F. Austin returned to a troubled Texas. Earlier, you read that Austin had been held in a Mexican prison. This made Texas angry. They were also angry because Santa Anna, Mexico's dictator, was demanding that Texans pay taxes on goods from the United States. He wanted Texans to trade with Mexico instead. Texans wanted Santa Anna to pay attention to the Mexican Constitution of 1824, the plan of government Mexico adopted after it won independence from Spain. Many rights in it were important to Texans, but Santa Anna wanted more power than the Constitution gave him. Santa Anna sent troops to Texas, and on October 2, 1835, fighting began. A commander in the Mexican army had ordered his soldiers to take a cannon from the town of Gonzales. People of Gonzales placed a white flag on the cannon. The flag had a picture of a cannon on it, and the words, "Come and take it." What dare it was. The battle for the cannon lasted only a few minutes. The men of Gonzales, along with a group of Texas soldiers, easily defeated the Mexicans. A week later, on October 9th, Texans attacked a Mexican fort at Goliad. They wanted to protect settlers from the Mexican soldiers there. Once again, victory was theirs. These two battles gave Texans courage. They believed that they were on the road to revolution. They also knew that they could defeat Santa Anna's army, and they had a purpose. As one colonist said, "We have either to fight for our homes or fly and leave them." March on San Antonio. About 300 Texan groups gathered at Gonzales to begin a march on San Antonio. Soldiers there had chosen Stephen F. Austin as their commander-in-chief. In San Antonio, the Texan soldiers would face General Cos and about 1,100 soldiers, at last Mexican troops in Texas. On to San Antonio, the Texans shouted. Volunteers joined the troops as they marched. Among these were 37 men led by Juan Seguin. Austin sent 90 soldiers ahead with commanders James Bowie and James Fanning. They were there to find a safe place for the troops to camp near San Antonio. However, this small group was attacked by about 270 Mexican soldiers. Even so, the Texans overpowered the Mexicans. Soon, the other Texas troops arrived, eager to attack the Mexican army. Texas leader Ben Milam shouted, "Who will go with old Ben Milam into San Antonio?" 300 men answered his call. On December 5, 1835, Milam and Frank Johnson led an attack on Mexican soldiers in San Antonio. The fighting went on for 4 days. Milam was killed, but in the end the Texans won the battle. The Mexican army returned to Mexico. Texans hoped the fighting had ended, but Santa Anna had other ideas. He planned to lead an army into Texas himself. A new government. While Texas soldiers were at San Antonio, other Texans were meeting in San Felipe. This meeting was called the Consultation. First, the Texans talked about their beliefs. One group at the meeting wanted to remain loyal to Mexico and the Constitution of 1824. Other people wanted to declare independence from Mexico. Next, the people at the meeting created a temporary government for Texas. They elected Henry Smith as governor and Sam Houston as commander-in-chief of the army. The new government had problems from the beginning. Governor Smith argued with those who wanted to remain part of Mexico. Sam Houston was in charge of the army, but he had no money to pay soldiers. Leaders, including Stephen F. Austin, were sent to the United States to raise the money needed to fight Santa Anna. The Texas leaders agreed to meet again in March of 1836. At that time, they would continue with plans to fight against Santa Anna. Meanwhile, Santa Anna himself was on the move. By early February of 1836, he and his troops had crossed the Rio Grande. His army was on the march to San Antonio. Texas declares independence. As planned, Texas leaders met again on March 1st of 1836 at the town of Washington on the Brazos. Meanwhile, Santa Anna had arrived in San Antonio. Texas soldiers were defending themselves at the Alamo. You will read more about this historic battle in the next lesson. The meeting was at Washington on the Brazos, was called the Convention of 1836. People gathered in an unfinished building owned by a blacksmith. This time there was no argument. Santa Anna's ongoing attacks had made one thing clear. The Texans must fight him in order to gain their independence from Mexico. First, the leaders decided to declare independence from Mexico. Then, they could form a government for a new country, the Republic of Texas. George G. Childress was in charge of writing the Declaration. He and his group based it on the United States Declaration of Independence. The purpose of the Declaration was to explain why Texas wanted to be independent from Mexico. The Declaration listed the problems Texans had with Mexico's rule. For example, Texans did not have the freedom of religion. They did not have the right to a jury trial. Texans did not have the right to petition or make requests of the government. On March 2nd, every person in the convention voted in favor of the Declaration of Independence. Today, Texans celebrate March 2nd as Texas Independence Day. A new constitution. Even though Texas was still part of Mexico, Texans now considered themselves an independent nation. Texas's citizens needed their own constitution. The purpose of the Texas Constitution was to establish how the new government would work. The leaders at Washington on the Brazos worked for 2 weeks on a plan. Then they wrote it down. The Texas Constitution of 1836 was much like the U.S. Constitution. It called for 3 branches of government. The Constitution also contained a Bill of Rights. This bill stated that certain rights belonged to all Texans. For example, Texans would now enjoy the freedom of speech and religion. They would also have the right to a trial by jury. The bill also encouraged people to move to Texas. However, the Constitution did not free slaves living in Texas. Even free African Americans would have to get permission from the new government to stay in Texas. This rule even applied to African Americans who were fighting against Mexico. African Americans such as Samuel McCulloch, Hendrick Arnold, and Greenberry Logan would now have to ask permission to stay in the very land they defended. In fact, Greenberry Logan wrote the petition about the new Texas Constitution of 1836. 22 other African Americans signed Logan's petition. Logan said that the Constitution deprived him of every privilege dear to a freedman. No vote or say in anything. Despite the petition, the Constitution remained unchanged. Temporary government. Texas was at war with Mexico. There was no time to hold elections, but the new nation needed leaders to govern it. So the leaders at Washington on the Brazos set up a temporary government. David G. Burnett, a Texas lawyer and a landowner, was chosen to be president of Texas. Lorenzo de Zavala was named the vice president. When the officials were sworn in on March 17, 1836, they had a serious question on their minds. Would the Texas Army now be able to protect the new republic?